I never thought I'd see my parents again, not after I left my mother in the concentration camp. We'd been separated from my father months before, the night we all got arrested in Budapest. They took the men one direction, the women and children the other, and we thought we'd never see him again. They took my mother and I, along with the rest of the women and children, to a prison camp not far outside Budapest called Kistarsa. We were there for months, starving, barely hanging on, until one day, three men from the Swedish Red Cross showed up at the camp and convinced the commandant that according to the Geneva Conventions, he needed to release all the children under 14 into their custody. And so I was whisked away from my mother, and I thought I'd never see her again. I mean, I was only 13, but we all knew what happened to the people in the concentration camps. As we drove away from Kistarsa, one of the men from the Red Cross said to us, "This isn't really a Red Cross operation. We're doing this for a man named Raoul Wallenberg. He's trying to save as many people as he can, especially children." That was the first time I'd heard his name, Wallenberg. They took us to a children's home run by the Swedes, but I was only there for a couple of weeks before I got scarlet fever and ended up in the hospital. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks in quarantine, but I was the lucky one because one day while I was in quarantine, a group of men from the Arrow Cross, that's the Hungarian fascists, they got drunk and they broke into the children's home and kidnapped and murdered all the children in the home. All of them. All except me, because I wasn't there. They took me to another Swedish-run children's home, and I've been living there ever since until my father showed up at the Swedish embassy. My mother and father have the craziest story. My mother was on a transport that was bound for Auschwitz and got diverted to the camp that my father was at, and they found each other, and they managed to escape one night when the partisans sabotaged the gate. They made their way across the burnt out countryside until they made it back to Budapest. And they've been hiding in Budapest. But one day, my father said to my mother, "This is not going to work. We're going to get caught. I am going to go see if I can find that miraculous Swede that everyone is talking about, that Raoul Wallenberg, see if he can help us." So my father shows up at the Swedish embassy. 5 minutes later, he is standing in front of this elegant young man holding 2 passes in his hand. One for him, one for my mother. Schutz passes, protective safe passes that give them the protection of the Swedish embassy. And my father looks up at Mr. Wallenberg, and Mr. Wallenberg smiles at him and says, "Do you know, we still have your little girl." And so we were reunited, and we're living in this safe house, this apartment building in Budapest that flies a Swedish flag and is under the protection of the Swedish government. And for the first time in a very long time, I think we might be okay because someone considered us worthy of being saved. Mine was not the only family that was saved by Raoul Wallenberg and his colleagues at the Swedish embassy. In the last few months of the war, in Nazi-occupied Budapest, more than 30 buildings flew Swedish flags and were under the protection of the Swedish embassy. Tens of thousands of Jewish lives were saved. And some of the stories are just crazy. Apparently, when Wallenberg heard that they were taking Jews out to the Danube and shooting them, he said to his people, who knows how to swim. They went down to the banks of the Danube in the dark of night, and every time they heard a splash, he sent a swimmer in to try to rescue the people and bring them to a pair of ambulances he had brought that could take them to the hospital that he had built. He saved 50 or 60 people this way. My friend told me a story about when she was on a death march with her mother and her aunt. They were locked into a brick factory at night with 500 other people. They wake up in the morning to find this young man in this long black leather coat bustling among them, saying, don't worry, I'll come back for you. They thought they were imagining things, that they were dreaming. But when the gates were unlocked, they found trucks, not German trucks, Swedish trucks. And this same young man, Wallenberg, standing there with a sheaf of papers saying, don't you remember? I gave you this pass. You forgot it, but I have a copy for you. Get on the truck. It's going to be okay. And my friend says that 500 people as one looked up at the sky and said, Shema Yisrael. Not just because they were saved, but because someone had found them worthy of being saved. You see, this is what they took from us, not just our lives, but our sense of self-worth. And this is what Wallenberg and his colleagues gave us back. Not only our lives, but our sense of ourselves, our sense of our own worth. They gave us back our humanity.